Hey, this is Kendrick, and so today we're going to be interviewing Alex Williams, who is a senior security consultant at GuidePoint Security. And today he's going to be helping us to understand what we need to do to become better hackers or to become hackers, but also he's going to tell us about resources and different things that GuidePoint Security and also maybe some of his personal projects. So I do have my first question. Okay. Question number one, the most important thing of the entire interview. So don't be nervous about this, but please explain your infatuation with Stitch. Okay,
Oh,
so if you look at his profile, if you know Lilo and Stitch, he has that all over like his Twitter account. So he's a big fan. So tell us about that first.
yeah. So Lilo and Stitch, that was just a big movie for me when I was growing up.
Uh huh.
It was a huge thing. I didn't really have the Ohana kind of deal, the family thing going on, and Stitch was just kind of this wild child, uh, you know, little monster that no one really paid attention to in the Disney world. And I was like, oh, that guy's cool.
Uh huh.
He's wild, but he's smart, but he can still like get things done, whatever. It was really cool. And so it just kind of stuck one day. I don't even remember where I first started using it, but I needed a handle for something. And I was like, I'll just use Stitch. And it just stuck. And I have used it everywhere since. I use it at work. I
Mm-hmm.
use it GitHub, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it. That's what I have. So I even have different variants that I use for the avatar for like Christmas, where he has a hat. When COVID started breaking out, he had a mask on, all that good stuff. So it's just I don't know, came out of nowhere really, but yeah,
Yeah.
you can see back here, all sorts of Stitch stuff. That actually has Stitch written on it.
Okay.
It's from work. So yeah, and it I would say it came really out of nowhere, and it just kind of stuck when it hit. So
Well, tell me a little bit about your background too, because I've kind of LinkedIn stalked you just a little bit. Which I mean, I was surprised. I mean, so a lot of security guys they don't have a lot out on LinkedIn, but I got mixed feelings about that too because the reality is it's always good to be marketing yourself because you never know when things may change with employment or whatever. So it's always good to make sure that you're keeping yourself marketable and ready to go.
yeah,
But tell me a little bit about your past and how and kind of your career path to become a senior security consultant, and then also what is a senior security consultant? What does that really entail as far as your job function?
sure, yeah. So I'll start with my history, and we'll do that in a nutshell. So I grew up with computers. Probably right around 12, I started getting more and more interested in getting on the computer, playing video games. World of Warcraft was a huge deal for me. I still play to this day.
Okay.
So it's been like almost 15 years, I guess, that I've been
How do you
playing.
have time to play WoW and still have a productive life?
Who said it was productive?
Agree. Agree.
Yeah, so I wanted to be able to play video games and things like that. But my mom, she was like super against me playing except at certain times. Like I would get sick or something like that, but I wouldn't be too sick to like be able to run around the house. And she would go to work and I would play on the computer and I would find ways to get on the computer without, getting caught and, make sure I was able to put the computer back to the way it was before she got back. And so I started learning stuff like that. And I ended up going to a trade school that was just basically a certificate boot camp when uh, I was in my late 17 year. So I was 17 years old, but I was about to turn 18. And I remember being extremely bored, and it was very interesting because I was the youngest person there, but I was bored with the content, and it was basically here's how you stand up Active Directory, here's how you reset a password on a Active Directory computer, here's how you get your A+ certification, things like that. And I was like, well, I learned a lot of this when I was trying to fix computers for like when I would break them, with LimeWire or whatever, when I was, being mischievous with the computer at home. So I had already learned a lot of this stuff. So I would basically just sit through this trade school and I would play video games. And I remember one day the owner of the company actually was sitting behind me in the class, and I'm playing World of Warcraft,
No
not
way.
covering it up at all. And I'm just straight up playing it, headphones on, not listening to the instructor. And everybody knew, like, no, and nobody cared. But the teacher came up later and he goes, "That's pretty gutsy." And I said, "What?" He's like, "You're playing WoW while like the owner is here." And I'm like, "Well, I already paid him my money, so what else does he want?"
I'm a customer, right?
Yes. So long story short, I ended up like not actually passing that trade school. I ended up getting about probably 3 of the certifications out of the 14 that they offered in that trade school. And they still offered this career like services thing. It was intended for people who have been in, who have had jobs before, but are looking to make that career switch. So it was kind of an oddball for me where I'm like, yeah, I work at like, grocery store. and they were like, all right, well, you're new, so we're going to give you this help desk job. And they ended up not being able to really place me very well. I would usually end up solving the problem. I remember they put me into a bank one time, and the project was supposed to go 6 months or something like that. We finished it in 3 months, and they sent us home just because we got the work done. And it was a team of 4 of us, and we split it together, and we just knocked it out. So I was in and out of jobs a lot, which wasn't really bad. It was just, I couldn't find one that I really liked. So I didn't really have any attachments back home. So like I didn't really have a girlfriend or anything like that. So I told them I had heard that some of the people that came out of that school had gone overseas to war zones like Afghanistan or Iraq, Iran, things like that, where they're contractors over there. I said, that sounds like fun. Like, you're crazy. I said, I don't care.
Okay, I have a different definition, but okay.
Yeah. And I said, do they pay a lot? And they're like 6 figures. And I said, well, that's great. I'm like 18, so let's do that. And so, and it was all variable. So it just depended on what job you got, which is how much you got paid, obviously. So I finally got an in there. It took probably 6 months for me to finally get someone to talk to me and like take a look at my resume, which was not huge. I had just worked at IBM for a little while and like a couple other little jobs here and there. So they're like, hey, we got a help desk spot open in Kuwait. You want to go there? And I'm like, no. And they said, what do you mean?
Wait, wow, that's
I'm like,
you're
I
talking
want
about
to go
like
to Afghanistan. So,
okay,
and they're like, why do you want to go to Afghanistan? I said, well, it's more money. And they're like, that's true, but it's dangerous. And I said, what do I have to lose? It's going to be fun, whatever. And, I'm just kidding.
your use of fun is a little bit different. I'm just still.
Well, I mean, if you're not having a blast,
Yeah, that's a real, that's a real blast. Go.
So
Hmm.
I I went over there and I was a help desk admin for about 3 months, 3 or 4 months there, I think. And I automated a lot of their processes. And I'm telling this part of the story for a reason into how I got into security because it's very important.
Hmm.
And I got really comfortable, and I didn't like that. So I started talking to the systems administrators, and I actually made a really good friend out of one of the systems admins to the point where we're actually best friends to this day. I talk to him every day, and he lives like 5 minutes from me. So he started teaching me. He was like, here's the stuff that you need to learn. Here's how to be a systems admin here. And by the time I was done with the training that he provided, they gave me an interview from some other sysadmin on another base. And the sysadmin was like, you showed me stuff that I didn't even know about our network. And I'm like, that's cool. It's like, cool. And, I want to teach everybody if you knew something I didn't know, I wanted you to tell me. He's like, this is great. So I got the job. The reason I'm bringing that up is because I was able to learn systems administration before I got into security.
Okay.
And I learned systems administration to the point of being comfortable with it. And I'm not an expert in it, and I never will be. I don't know how Kerberos works, and I bet you 95% of the people that will listen to this know how
I've tried to
Kerberos works.
hack it unsuccessfully, but that's all I know.
It's incredibly complicated,
Yeah.
and yeah. So, but I'm comfortable with Active Directory. I can build Active Directory for us. I can build this. I can do that. So I'm here, and I decide I want to go back home. I want to, I want to go back to America. I want to go back to North Carolina, where I live. And so I did, and I started going back through, sysadmin jobs over and over and over again because it was easy to get into. I go through the interview. I'm very comfortable now. I'm not an expert, but I'm comfortable enough that I can speak confidently to the sysadmin. While I was overseas, I got 2 or 3 extra certifications that were just, Microsoft required certifications to what I call like HR passers that allow you to get past HR.
Uh-huh.
They mean absolutely nothing to a technical person. They're like, great, you read a book,
But you got to get in the door first. You got to get
but
through
HR is
yeah.
like, the technical manager has told them, I need this certification, and the HR goes, that's the certification. And I was really bored, to be honest. And so I was working at the EPA, and all this is public, so I can just tell you where I was at. So I looked over at my buddy who was working with me at the time there and said, this is like stupid. And he was like, what do you mean this is stupid? And this is not to knock anybody who's a sysadmin. I'm not saying that. I looked at him and said, I shouldn't be doing this mundane task if I'm comfortable with it. If it's something that I'm so comfortable with that I'm mindlessly doing it now, I shouldn't be doing this.
Yep.
Why don't I try to break this instead? And he goes, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, there's got to be hackers that have to break this, right? And he's like, well, yeah, but how are you going to start? I'm like, oh, let me ask my what are they? The recruiters for, like for if you're a contractor, you have a recruiter, right? For like the recruiting firm.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, yeah, I have this this organization that I go to every Thursday called the Raleigh ISSA.
Okay.
And they're awesome, or Triangle ISSA or whatever. And I said, okay, cool, I'll go. And I showed up, I met a couple people, and I heard them talk about this one certification. And they're like, yo, if you get this certification, like, you're crazy. And I'm like, that sounds awesome.
Like, it's got to be like OSCP or something.
And it was OSCP. And my OSCP is right there. So I cherish that thing. I have sand certs that are in a box compared to that. And I had no idea what it was. I knew it was a hacking certification. I knew that you had a hands-on lab instead of a multiple choice question exam. And I knew that it was 24 hours and that no one, with the exception of like 5 people at that entire get together, had an OSCP. And I'm like, I want to be the next person to get that.
And just quick thing. So for everybody watching, I think it's what offensive security. What is it? Certified professional. Okay.
Yep. So, and it's hosted by Offensive Security, offensivesecurity.com. So, I went home, and that night I registered for it. Like, I don't think I read through the entire article. I just registered for it. And I messaged one of the guys that I met there. His name was Peter. And I was like, hey, Peter, you're doing the OSCP, right? And he's like, yeah. I said, I am too. And he's like, cool. And he wasn't like shocked, but he was also like, I just met you and you just found out about this. And I'm like, I'm going to do it. And he's like, okay.
Yeah, that's a little bit odd because, I mean, I'm not hearing like you took any time to prepare for the certification or anything. Like, you literally just learned about it and signed up for it. Is that? Wow.
So the OSCP course material was supposed to be there to teach you. And so you sign up for the course material. And so I read through it and I did the labs as I could. And I didn't have a lot of time. So it actually did take me about 1.5 years to get it done.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
But I was learning. I was reading through the paperwork. I was reading through the video, or, listening to the videos. I was following the labs. I had to re-up. It ended up, I mean, I'm not going to lie to anybody. It ended up costing me about $1,000, $1,500 more than if I had dedicated time to do it. And I was lazy at some points. I got bored with it. It was hard, so I didn't really want to do it too much. It was much easier to just fall back into that complacency and the easiness and just, oh, I can just sit here and do nothing.
Yeah, and another thing, hey, let me throw this in just for a second because see that's the experience. I think a lot of people get discouraged and never like one of my first certification tests I failed. Like it was a Juniper certification, and I failed it because I didn't even know the module that I was supposed to study was actually not in the book. It was on their website,
Yeah.
and so I got discouraged and I kept putting it off and putting it off, and I never went back to take that certification.
Yep.
And so now I got some SANS certifications. I got a couple of those. But it's just one of those things, just for everybody that's watching the video, please understand that failing certifications is a normal thing. And you should have employers that don't expect you to pass every certification test the first time. That is very unrealistic for an employer and a terrible thing to do to employees. So anyway, I'll throw it in and go.
Yeah. The number one thing an employer should do is remove the roadblock that you have to get a certification. When I was a manager at GuidePoint, and we can get into that in a minute, but when I was a manager at GuidePoint, the number one thing that I tried to do to the best of my ability was when one of my guys or girls came to me and said, hey, I want to get the certification. The first thing I did was message my senior manager, the person who had the final approval, and go, this person wants this, and I need this approval today, please. Or I need this as soon as possible. And I wouldn't, obviously kill them with it, but I would make that a priority so that they're not sitting there, they're not waiting on an expense report. They're not, and GuidePoint's policy is get your cert. Like, it's, do your thing, man. Like we're here to help. So that was my number one goal there. So any employer that is, like makes you go through HR and then it's just this generic HR message coming back going, you have to submit this through your payment processing thing and yada, yada, yada. They're not really paying attention to your needs and your learning. And you should really have a conversation with your manager, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think you tell me your opinion, but I think as an employer, you really do want to prepare it. Like the risk of like a lot of employers may not want to overtrain their people or have their, take their people to the level of expert because they're so fearful of you losing them. But I think that's one of the best things as an employer that you can do. If like an employee myself, if I know I can continue to do training, that's incentive for me to stay. If my company ever stops like training us, then it puts me in a bad position because then all of a sudden my growth has been stunted.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. What's the point of going to a place if you're going to remain stagnant? Like that, like never be the smartest person in the room.
Exactly.
Like 100%.
And never know everything on your job. If you know everything, you
should always have someone to go to, and you should always strive to be someone that someone goes to you for. Which that's not always possible, but that's definitely lead by example, right? Anyway. Back to the story, I signed up for the OSCP and I got bored and I got tired and I got lazy. And then I was dating this one person and it's a funny story, so we'll just throw it in there. I got mad one day, we broke up, and the next day I went 24 hours straight studying OSCP and knocked out like 10 chapters.
I need that energy.
Yeah. And like, I think I called one of my friends and was like, I'm ready to take this exam. And he goes, don't like tell me you're ready until you send me your email saying that you've got your exam slotted and like you're ready to go. And I did that day. I scheduled the exam. I was not done with the material, but that's what exam rescheduled it for. And I went there, or I didn't go anywhere, but I went into the material and I studied. And on April, was it 18th or 15th?
You want me to LinkedIn stalk you right quick and get your
April 28th of 2015, I got my OSCP. Yep. And I did get it on the first try, but I will tell anybody this. If I had to guess, I passed it with exactly 70 points. because I say that because when I was in there, I only had 65 points that I could confirm. I only knew I had 65 points worth of flags. And so I just kicked out the best report that I could and mentioned a vulnerability that I knew existed but couldn't get. And all of a sudden I had the pass. So for those of you who are taking an OSCP right now, if you are in your exam, you know that you're not going to be able to exploit something due to time or just lack of knowledge or whatever. Mention it in your report. Explain why you think it's vulnerable. Even come up with a remediation, come up with a reference to it. But add that to your report, because that is taken into consideration as far as I know, which obviously OffSec keeps, their stuff extremely secretive on how they score, but that can't hurt. Any executive is going to want to see that anyway. So I got my OSCP, and I was working as a blue teamer at that point. And I'll be 100% honest when I say that I got lucky to be put in the position to be able to work as a blue teamer where I was, because I knew someone. And networking is extremely important in InfoSec. And I don't mean networking as in like bug every single person you can until they talk to you. I mean, just going to conferences, listening, asking questions that you genuinely have a question about. Chances are someone else has that same question. And even if you don't end up making friends, so to speak, or whatever, with the person that you want to make friends with, everybody wants to be friends with all of the information security, like go-to people, so to speak, Dave Kennedy and
Craig Everson, John Strand.
Yeah, everybody wants to know those, right? Yeah. But what about this other person that's way over here who's not really talking much, but he had the same question you did? They might come up to you and go, hey, I had that same question. Now you guys are friends. Who do they know? And the networking starts to build, and it takes time. So be patient.
Well, I'll say also, and I think you pointed out a good point. You started off early. You were involved in ISSA, which is good. I'm part of ISSA. Also, InfraGard. I've been very active with InfraGard for a number of years. Big presence there. I'm trying to think what else. I guess if you're on the compliance side, there's a SACA, and y'all can look these up later if you want to be on the compliance and control side. But the main point is, it's not just to go in there and sit there. You really want to go in there and you want to take the time to meet people. You want to pay attention, because if you're going to ask questions, you really do need to have questions that, I think there is such a thing as a stupid question. And it's not, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree with you. There can be, but it's stretched, right? It's very obvious when a question is there that shouldn't be there. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I'll ask a genuine question, even if I feel like it's stupid, because I legitimately need it. But some people, a lot of times, they're just trying to have a question so they can get their recognition or get people to notice and stuff like that. And people smell BS a mile away. So just advice, don't do that. And I think another thing, you tell me about this. A lot of people that I see that are working their way to get into security, they don't play with stuff in their home. Like, your home needs to become your laboratory. Like, I got all kind of like gear. Like, I literally have a freaking network closet of gear here, Cat 5 cables all over the place. It's just, that's normal to me. That's been my entire life, is you want to play with this stuff. I call it being a purist. I don't know if that's a true term, but a lot of people, they come into this industry and they just really want to work in it, but they're not adopters and they don't really have a true connection to this. They just want to get paid. And I feel like that's a bad thing to do. It's a bad way to try to get into this field.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'll be the first to tell you that there's a difference between so for sysadmin, there's and I've been there in a lot of different places. In sysadmin, it's fairly stable, the exact same thing the whole way you go. Maybe you've got an Azure developer, maybe you've got an AWS implementation that still runs with stuff like that and whatever. But when it comes to security, you're in a different field depending on what industry you're working in. If you're working in telecommunications, you're going to be in a more relaxed environment. if you're in medical, you are really, really going to be limited. And if you're in the banking industry, you are going to be limited so hard that it's going to be red tape to do almost anything you want whatsoever. Like, I used to work in a financial institution that, and I was a pen tester, that would not even allow Burp Suite on certain devices that were specifically needed to be able to access certain tests. And it took us 6 months to get just Burp Suite installed, and things like that. And God forbid needing Kali anywhere. So it all depends on the industry, or not even just the industry, but the industry that you want to go into in security as well.